the thing is that, the pool is expanding from 4 to 12, but I
Yep.
think that is going to, I think ultimately it's going to really affect year in and year out, how we think, because right now it's like, oh, you got a great chance. You got a better chance to get in. You're going to feel good about that up front. But how long is it going to take until just getting there isn't good enough, or just winning one or two games, because you've got to win, multiple rounds to advance in the college football playoff, just like the NFL. It's going to be much more like the NFL playoffs now, as opposed to what we've seen, So, like, the question is, how is this expanded field? How is it going to change how we think about the success or failure of a Notre Dame season? What do you think about that, for starters?
Well, it'll change things because people are going to have to get used to the new terminology, right? Because Notre Dame, so they make the playoff next year and they don't win any games. Well, that's not good. That's not good enough. That's a failure. But then you'd be like, well, they made the playoff. Well, we got to get used to the new terminology. Finishing it in the top 12 and making the playoff is like going to a New Year's Six game. That's what it is.
Right.
Right. So you've got to be able to go in there and you got to win that game. And that was the expectation going into this year, was getting to the New Year's Six and winning it. Like, that was my expectation. That was my floor of an expectation this year. It wasn't to make the playoff. That was, an expectation, I suppose. But the floor, get to a New Year's Six, win it, and then you win, you've got a great launching point to the next year, right?
Sure.
So we have to change our terminology, because if this is next year and it's the same team and I have the same expectations, the expectation would be to make the playoff and win a game in the playoff. That would be the expectation. So we have to change like our vocabulary to match the expectations. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, but what's like I understand like what you're saying right there, but then when you sit and you kind of step back and you look at it, okay, not only has, like, Notre Dame hasn't won a New Year's Six bowl in more than 30 years
93
at this point, right?
Yep.
So now you're essentially, just to get to the championship game, going to have to win 3 games of essentially equal caliber,
Sure.
with barring upsets. Each round is going to get a little bit tougher to advance, so
Absolutely.
it's like, at some point, again, like where we are right now, it's like everyone's expecting that Notre Dame is going to get into the playoff a year from now. I think most Notre Dame fans, when I say everyone, it's like most everyone's expecting that a year from now. And then, just like you said, the basic expectation is you're going to win that game.
Sure.
Well, how many times of just doing that are the expectations going to swing pretty quickly? Like, just like with Josh Allen. Okay, the Buffalo Bills went forever without getting in the playoffs. Now they're in the playoffs every year, but, well,
Sure.
you got to play Patrick Mahomes every year.
Well, yeah,
You're not going
yeah.
anywhere. Just like with the Dallas Cowboys. You're in the playoffs. You're winning you're winning 12 games in the regular season.
Right.
But it's not doing anything for you once you get to the playoffs. And it's going to change. I think it's going to, it's pretty quickly, depending on success or failure, it's going to change how we think about a season ultimately. Like, it's okay, it's like, okay, it's great you're in the playoffs, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like taking a look at Mike Bray in the NCAA, like with his tournament success. Great, you made the tournament, but you're not going anywhere. With the exception of a couple years, you're not going anywhere. You maxed
Sure.
out most of the time at the Sweet 16, and you had more first and second round exits overall. And so, like, people become dissatisfied at some point.
Oh, and they will become. I mean, look, we're talking about Notre Dame fans here, right? The expectation is to win a national championship every year.
Yes.
That's the unrealistic expectation every single year. That's not going to change, right? When you're talking about expectations from people that follow the team closely from a realistic standpoint, I think that every year you go in with a different scenario and a different perspective and all that. But what Marcus Freeman is doing from a roster building standpoint, the floor is making the playoff. That's the floor from here on out.
It's pretty much every year is college.
It has to be.
It's playoff or bust, right?
It has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, okay, 4 out of 5 years, you got to make the playoffs. 3 out of 4 years, you got to make whatever number you want to throw out there. You got to make the playoff 4 out of 5 years. That's the expectation. Okay, you can have an off year. Nobody will like it when they're in it, right? But when you look at the big picture, okay, you had an off year, whatever, back to what you normally do. Okay. I'm fine with that. That should be the expectation. You're Notre Dame. You're Notre freaking Dame. You should be in the playoff every year if it's 12 teams. You absolutely should be. It's how many games are they going to win once they get in? Are they hosting, a first round game? That then you get into the nuances and, things of that nature. But that's going to vary from year to year. But every year, I think, should be the expectation to make the playoff. And I don't think that's unfair. I really don't. I don't think it's unfair to expect Notre Dame to be a top 11 team every year.
I think you have to. And I think that's going to be their expectation every year. But it also can't, their own expectation can't just be, get to the playoffs. It's obviously got to be more than that.
Right.
Because again, you've already been in a 4-team playoff and you lost these lopsided games. And again, spinning it back to what the expectations turn into, it's like, okay, that was great, but we got our doors blown off a couple of times, and that wasn't good enough,
right.
And a lot of people, you, Brian included, were it's time to move on from Brian Kelly. He's reached the ceiling.
He hit his
that
ceiling,
he's going to reach. You have to go somewhere else. And I was kind of, I could see that sort of line of thinking, but there are other times it's like, man, they haven't been this good in more than a couple of decades. There's no assurances that you can do better.
But it does get stale though, right? I mean,
it definitely got stale.
The message, I think, gets stale after a while as well. I think some of the things that, coaches do or things that are happening in a program, they get stale or they become, we got to kind of look at this a little bit closer maybe than we were looking at it before. Maybe winning some of those games, blinded us to a couple of facts or a couple of things or allowed us to look in a different direction. And I think once you do something enough times, it's like, okay, you're being successful. Yes. But are you being as successful as you can be? Is this the ceiling? I think that's what we have to ask ourselves as Notre Dame fans, as analysts or whatever. Is there a glass ceiling for Notre Dame? Can they ever win a national championship again? I think that's a legitimate question right now. Of course, I think it's a yes. I think they can, but they haven't won since I was 7.
Well, and that's the thing.
It's been a long time.
Is it getting easier or is it getting harder? Entry is getting easier because it went from 2012, only 2 teams get, BCS championship game. That was it. Then they expanded to a 4-team playoff. Okay. They made it a couple of times in an 8-year, 10-year span or whatever it was. And now they're going to expand it to 12. But again, you've got to win 3 of those. You've got to win 3 times if you're Notre Dame, because you're never going to have a first round bye. You've got to win 3 times to get to the championship. You've got to win 4 games in the playoff to win a national championship. So,
I would argue though that all of those teams that are top 4 have to win all those games too, because the conference championship, you got to win that one in order to get a bye in the first place.
Yeah.
And so that's why I personally have no problem with Notre Dame not being able to be a top 4 and getting that bye. It doesn't matter to me because they get the bye while those other 4 teams are playing the conference championship game. Those are playing games now, guys. If you lose the conference championship game, you're not getting a bye in the first round, right? So that's a playing game. You have to be a conference champion to get a bye.
Well, to get a bye, to get a bye, you've got to be one of the top 4 conference champions,
right?
To get a bye in the first round. Yeah,
that conference championship weekend, that is a play-in game to get a bye.
Right.
Notre Dame's sitting back, not playing that.
Notre Dame doesn't have to play that. That's right. So we've talked about that before. Notre Dame is essentially giving up its right to have a bye because they don't
because they're getting
have to play in a conference championship game. And like Brad asked if they would join a conference to get a home field advantage, they can get home field advantage without
Yeah, they
being,
don't need that.
in a conference. They just don't get a first round bye. Like if they are undefeated, 12-0, they're going to be the number 5
They'll be
seed,
the 5 seed,
most
right?
likely, right?
Yeah.
And if you're the number 5 seed, you're going to get to host a first round game.
The group
If
of
you
5 team at Notre Dame.
Right. If you're the 5, 6, 7, or 8 seed, if your seeds 5 through 8, you would get to host a first round playoff game. So that
Right.
has nothing to do with whether or not you're in a conference. So there's
Nope.
no benefit. There's no extra benefit to Notre Dame for being it. The only benefit is you potentially would get a first round bye. But
Right.
I mean, all that does is, okay, just like I'm trying to it didn't affect either of the number 1 seeds this weekend. It almost affected the 49ers. They had a first round bye. They almost lost to the Packers.
I mean, Notre Dame just gets their bye a week ahead of everybody else. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
They just don't get their bye the same week.
That's actually a really good way to look at it is
Yeah.
they get a week to rest. Actually, they'll get a few more weeks to rest
true.
because there'll be, like a gap in between when the playoffs actually start
Right.
and all that kind of stuff.
So they get their bye ahead. They get their bye before the top 4 picks or, the top 4 teams get their bye. They all get byes last time I checked. So it's fine.
Yeah. So Irish AJ says winning 3 games versus winning 2 is a major advantage for the teams with byes. I mean,
you still got to win the conference championship.
Right. You have to win that conference championship game to get the bye. So you still have to play a game.
You got to play that game.
It's just a matter of it's really semantics. It's
Right.
just a matter like a shell game. Like it's just a matter of where the game, is played and what it means. Notre Dame doesn't have to play that. The other teams all have to play that game potentially. Now, remember, there are also going to be teams that don't even like third or fourth teams from a conference, Big Ten, SEC, whatever it happens to be, that are going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Most likely they're not going to be, I would say, like if you looked at it from a statistical perspective, when I say most likely because they're not one of the top 2 teams in their conference, therefore not playing in the conference championship game, they're probably also going to have to go on the road.
Right.
In the first round of the playoffs. They're not going to get to host a playoff game is what I'm saying. Even though they're not going to have to play in that conference championship game.
It's going to be tough with the conference realignment and everything else for 3 teams from the same conference to make it on a consistent basis. You know what I mean? I think the winner and whoever they decide is the second best team, whether that's the team that lost in the conference championship, or whether that's a team that maybe should have been in the conference championship but wasn't. So now they're the number 2 team after however you want to look at it. I think 3 teams getting in is going to be tough. So I still feel like those teams are going to still have an extra game that they had to play against a obvious top flight opponent and now a top 4 seed in the playoff. So that's a tough game. And so make no mistake about it. Even though those teams are getting a bye, they're still playing a very difficult conference championship game to get that bye in the first place.
Right. And then as Ant VR says, then for the teams that lose that conference championship game but make the playoff, they're going to have to play an extra game. And again, that's, they're not going to get a first round bye because they lose that game, and they're still going to have to play as many games as Notre Dame is going to have to play. So that's, again, that's advantage Notre Dame.
Advantage Notre Dame. Clearly, because they don't have to play in that conference championship game and take the lump of that loss as well.
Because it's not only are you playing in that game, but you're also, because guys are playing in those games, there's always the inherent risk of injury and just anything else that can happen over the course of those games.
Right.
So, a couple other good points that were made up here. Father David says, I'd rather have a home playoff game and not play in a conference championship game than a neutral site game with a bye plus the conference championship game.
Hey, I'm on record. I would much rather have a game in December at Notre Dame Stadium against a group of 5 team or whoever it happens to be.
Right.
Absolutely. I'll take that all day long.
Then Irish AJ said if the playoff game was this year, Georgia or Alabama would have both made it anyway, win or loss. So that 13th game in certain instances still gets them in the playoff. Yes, but
But they still got to play the
again,
game.
only they still have to play the game, and only the winner of that game gets the bye. There's no
Right.
guarantee of where the other team is going to end up being seated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And look at it like, I think Georgia fell to what was it? I think they fell from first to sixth after losing to Alabama,
I think so.
something like that. Now, that's going to be curious to me is, there's still, like in this case, I think the committee this year had no choice because of where the other teams and their records and all that stuff, but to probably drop Georgia as far as they did. But knowing that there's a 12-team field, I think that there's probably a greater chance that now they couldn't end up in the top four again because of the bye situation, the fact that you have to be a conference champ. But say Georgia was unbeaten going in there and they lose a close game to Alabama, and you've got a Notre Dame, for example, 12-0. Who's going to be the number 5 seed? Is it automatically Notre Dame because they're undefeated, or might Georgia snake that spot?
Which
potentially,
that's a fun debate, in my opinion. Like I have no problem with that debate. You know what I mean? And I think the debate would have been going into that game, who's the number 1 team in the country? Is it undefeated Georgia? Is it undefeated Notre Dame? Right? And yeah, I think that's a fun debate. I'm here for that.
Yeah. Well, I guess a little bit less than a year from now, about 10 months or so from now, we'll be having that.
I would love
hopefully we'll be having that specific
the undefeated
right?
Notre Dame debate. I would love to have that debate for sure.
Because that's the other thing is when the playoffs expand next year, tonight is January 22nd, but a year from now, because remember we have a leap year and all that.
Leap year.
The national championship game is January 20th. So basically 1 year from now is when the 2025, when the 2024 season, 2025 national championship game will be played. So like that's how far back it's been. We're 2 weeks removed.
2 weeks, yeah.
We're 2 weeks removed from the playing of the national championship game. So a year from now is when the next national championship college football game will be.
It's interesting because, they do a good job right now. And I don't even know if this is in any way planned, right? Because yes, college football is a big deal, but the NFL blows college football out of the water when it comes to ratings and all that. It just does. And once college football is over, it's all NFL playoffs. And it's, when you got wild card weekend and you've got 6 games, going on over a span of 3 days. And then you got the divisional round, you got the games that we just had. And then you're going to have you know what I mean? So like, I don't want to say it's going to take the shine off the NFL playoffs because it's not. The NFL is still king and it always will be. But I am very interested to see the interest level of the 12-team playoff as it's going head to head with the NFL playoffs, Sean.
No, I know. And I've kind of been thinking about that and looking at, because what happens when the college football season ends? You start getting NFL games on Saturdays. How's that going to, what's the schedule going to look like when you've got NFL? You're going to have NFL regular season and you're going to have NFL playoff games going on at the same time as, college football playoff games throughout the, late December and into, like last weekend would have been the semifinals, the first weekend of the NFL playoffs, for example. What's that going to look like in terms of the schedule? I love how we're getting group texts right in the middle of our show from our boss, but
I'm not cool enough. I didn't get that. At least
you didn't get them?
I don't think
Lucky you, because they pop up on my screen and ding every time that we get one. Could you see one or the other play some Friday night games potentially, as opposed to some Saturday games? Like, might they be moved around a little bit? Now, we did like the windows this past weekend. There were some, because I think we had 4:30 and then 8:00 games and stuff like that. So you could still fit, like a college playoff game into the afternoon and all that.
I'd be okay with afternoon. for the college games. I like college in the afternoon anyway. Save the NFL for the nighttime, I guess. I don't know. It's going to be it'll be. John says Friday nights are for high school football. There's no high school football in
There's
January.
no high school football
man.
in January. Sorry,
Like,
we're not talking about
Yeah.
November.
No, we're talking about now.
We're talking about December and January.
That was good. That was
yes,
good
look
stuff,
outside. John. There's no high school football being played.
Yeah, there's none. But no, I do think it'll be very interesting to see how they manage the schedule, because college football would be just stupid to go head to head with the NFL. Like that would not be smart. You're going to have to schedule around the NFL. And I mean, the NFL just absolutely owns these last 3 weekends. They own them. So, what's that going to look like?
Well, and as of right now, the college football playoff games are supposed to stay with ESPN. It's not looking like it's going to be split up, with multiple entities and stuff like that. And so you've got ESPN, ABC, obviously. Now they have like one game in each round of the playoffs, but you do still like you could put NFL on ABC just like they did this weekend and still do a college football playoff game at the same time, or a little earlier in the day, or whatever.
1 o'clock game, a noon game, 1 o'clock. Like that's
You do run the risk of like in the first round is, and I think I've got. Hang on just a second here, because I do. I've got the exact schedule, if I can find it. It's not popping up right here.
Of course not. When you need it.
Not when I need it.
It's not going to pop up. Why would it?
Well, I have to see if I can find it later. I don't know where it went, because I see all this.
Do they already have like the dates and stuff like ready to
go? That's what I was going to say.
Oh,
they have the dates and like, what games. I don't know why it's not coming up here, but that's life. But it will make things a little bit trickier.
Yeah, it definitely will.
There's just no way around it.
Because the NFL, I don't think, is going to be cooperative. They're just going to be like, look, here's what we do. You guys figure it out.
And that's what I was going to say. The NFL could easily swallow the whole thing up, basically, because of the NFL playoffs, especially. Like in December, you're still talking about NFL regular season games. So you can work around Sunday.
Right.
And I believe it's going to be like maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday is when those, like in the first round games, they'll actually will be a Thursday game or two, if I remember right.
Fine.
Yeah. But again, the later you go, the semifinals and the championship game is going to stay on a Monday. So you don't have to worry about the NFL there. But
I hate that. I hate Monday night. I hate it.
They found their niche, Vince. And again, they avoid the NFL.
I know.
Way. You don't have to worry about Saturday and Sunday. I don't understand why you don't put college football's national championship game on a Saturday.
Yeah.
College football is played on Saturday, and everyone is, especially in the winter, it's like you're home on Saturdays. Seems like a perfect time to do it. You don't have to get up and go to work the next day and all that kind of stuff. But
if we happen to be intimately covering the national championship game, I will not be going to work the next day. So
that's absolutely right.
Whether it's from this chair or elsewhere, I will not be going to work the next day.
So Jacob says, does the college football playoff rank then seed the playoff based on ranks, or are they the same? For example, Notre Dame is the best team in the nation, ranked number 1, but gets a 5 seed because they don't play and win a conference championship game.
Yes. I mean, yes.
So if Notre Dame was ranked the number 1 team in the nation going into conference championship weekend, when the playoffs are announced after the conference championship games, Notre Dame would at best always be the 5 seed, basically.
Yep. And everything else they would drop down to 5, and then everybody else would bump up, and everything else behind them would be what they normally would be. I mean, the only criteria is you got to be a conference champion to have a top 4. And if you're not, then you can't be. And everything else just falls into place behind it. So yeah, it's easy.
Right. There's another question. I think this was not DK in his only DK way. So 2 college teams will last longer in the playoffs than the Cowboys.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
theoretically, it happens all the time, right? Like, you can't hurt me, DK.
You can't hurt me.
You can't hurt me any more than Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones have already hurt me.
Right.
So that's just the way it is.
It's fair.
John, how important
Oh,
is beating Texas A&M on the road?
I got to tell you, I think it's really important, to be honest with you. I hate to put too much stock into game 1 of the season when we literally know nothing about the team from a gameplay standpoint. But I think it's pretty critical at this point because I think it's very much like, I know they're not Ohio State. I know they're not Alabama. I know they're not Georgia. They're still an SEC opponent on the road with a very, very good head coach who has done yeoman's work in the portal to upgrade that roster after the guys have left. And that's a notch on your belt for your schedule. Based on the schedule next year, you can win that game. That could very well be your best win of the season. On the road, game 1, who's ready for it? I think this could be similar to Ohio State last year in that it could springboard the rest of your season. And I know that's tough to say after game 1, but that is how I feel about Texas A&M. I think this can springboard them in 2 different directions. You know, if they win this game and they do it in
One
a
is really
convincing
good.
manner, they're gonna play, and they're gonna play really well the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying if they lose that game, the season's over. I'm not saying that. But if they lose that game, they're going to have to kind of regroup the wagons and figure out kind of what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There is no reason Notre Dame should lose this game. There's just not. They have the better roster. They have the better coaching staff. That they should win this game. Period.
Completely agree. And it is important. Of course it's important. You know, it's a road game. You didn't play well on the road this year. You're going to have, as you said, all the things that you just said in terms of the roster and the coaching staff, but you're also going to have a lot, you know, you're going to have the core group back from a great defense, but you're going to have a really completely different offensive 2 deep depth chart compared to what you had going into this season. Good news, Vince.
Oh, what is it?
I found next year's playoff schedule.
I knew you would.
So December 20th, later this year, 1 college football playoff game. December 20th is a Friday. December 21st, 3 games. That's a Saturday, obviously, since the 20th is Friday. So the 20th and 21st are the first 4 games. There's 1 game on a Friday, 3 games on Saturday.
Okay.
The 21st.
I'm writing these down because this is intriguing to me.
And now remember that, you know, because like we were talking about conflict with the NFL, that means that there would be minimal NFL conflict. You might have like an NFL game or 2 like that night, maybe something like that, but that's still the regular season. You're not going head to head with NFL playoff games. You're going head to head with NFL regular season games on the 21st, that Saturday. Now, so that is the first round. Quarterfinals, December 31st, 1 game. Not really sure why they're doing it this way. New Year's Eve, they're doing 1 game, the Fiesta Bowl, and that is a Tuesday. Fiesta Bowl on a Tuesday. Next day, New Year's Day, which, you know, I get, it's New Year's Day. 3 games, Peach Bowl, Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl. Still with me? Semifinals, January 9th and 10th. This is going to be Thursday and Friday, which makes things very interesting. You're going to have Thursday night national semifinal. Let me see. Yeah, 9th and 10th. January 9th on a Thursday, the Orange Bowl. January 10th, the Cotton Bowl on a Friday.
And this is how they're avoiding the NFL. They're doing it
This
on
is how they're
weekdays.
avoiding the NFL. Yes, I'm glad we found this because
Yeah.
this solves all the problems that we
Yeah.
were,
And then
raising
the
problems.
20th is
And
the
then the 20th
championship.
is the championship game on Monday. So there you go.
So there's no NFL conflict. Dude, I hate to say it. You're telling me I'm going to have high-level football from Tuesday to Sunday, and Thursday to Sunday in January, like January 9th. So is that the divisional round? Or no, it won't be the divisional round yet. That'll be the last week of the regular season, right?
Let me think.
The 9th
This
and the 10th?
year, oh man. I'm trying to remember.
Because there's 10 days in between. No, yeah, that would be the divisional round. So you're telling me the divisional round
Week 18 of the NFL season, the final week of the NFL season was January 6th and 7th. Is that what you're asking? Like when the NFL's regular season ends?
So the 9th and the 10th next year, based on what I think the calendar is going to look like, you're going to have Thursday, the Orange Bowl, Friday, the Cotton Bowl, Saturday, you could have two NFL games.
Yeah.
Sunday, you could have 2 to 3 NFL games, and Monday, you're going to have 1 to 2 NFL games. That's 5 straight days of playoff football, essentially.
Yeah.
You sign me up for that.
Bonanza, baby. That's
you
right.
Sign me up for that. That
exactly
sounds friggin' amazing to me. So I guess I'm no longer worried about having to compete with the NFL, and they're not stupid, and they didn't.
And I mean, again,
that.
The problem is solved there. You play on a Thursday and a Friday, you don't have to worry about it. That's how you avoid the NFL, obviously. And you've got to, again, they had to kind of space those games out a little bit to make it happen. But I think that also makes sense because as you get a little bit deeper into the playoffs, the games are bigger. You're playing more games than you've ever played before in college. So you're also building in, like a little bit more, rest time. I will be curious to see what happens though, 3 or 4 years from now when New Year's Eve and New Year's Day fall on the weekend. And then you are going to be potentially you're going to have a decision to make. Are you still going to play those games New Year's Eve and New Year's Day? Or are you going to bump them up again, like to a Thursday or Friday? Like, do Thursdays and Fridays become a little bit more the norm for the playoffs because, of like where New Year's happens to fall and that kind of stuff to avoid the NFL?
Can you imagine?
Because I think you have to. Just look at the ratings. You have to avoid it.
Yes. Can you imagine, Sean, following, let's just say Notre Dame for sake of argument. So Notre Dame wins on Friday the 20th, okay? And so they're moving on to the Rose Bowl, whatever. I'm just making things up.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got to fly out to California for the Rose Bowl, which, okay, I mean, that sounds okay, whatever. Then, let's say they win that one, then you've got to fly to either Texas or Florida for the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
And then you get to fly someplace else. Like, that's going to be crazy.
And I think that was one of the, concerns about just how much will college football fan bases travel for multiple games when you're talking about 3-4 games.
I mean, a football fan base like Notre Dame will, because
you're never going to have to worry about a Notre Dame because you've got fans all over the country.
But regional teams, it's going to be a lot more difficult. A lot more difficult.
Right. And like the burden on the families for that matter, I'm not sure exactly what'll be covered and what won't be covered and stuff like that. And, but then even then it's like, you got to take off work and there's a lot to it. Like if you're someone who's going to try to go to every playoff game, there's a lot of expense and there's a lot of travel and a lot of other factors that you have to.
And those are right in the middle of
your vacation days.
Those are right in the middle of the work week.
Uh-huh.
And usually these big bowl games, it's not a fly in the day before, cover the game, fly out. That's usually not how it goes. You know what I mean? There's days of events and things leading up to it. I mean, that's how these bowl games make money. You've got the parades and you've got the pep rallies and you've got the taking the team here and we're taking the team there, and you got to cover it and you got to do all these different, like, so even from a media perspective, usually for a bowl game, you're down there for like a week anyway. Now that's probably going to truncate, I would imagine, but still, there's a lot of question marks about how these things are going to get covered, about how these things are going to just everything, all about it. It's going to be very interesting to see.
For sure. By the way, I wanted to get this in from Ant VR. I'm not sure if he's still here or not. I think he's throwing she is throwing a couple other questions in. What's the off-season schedule for IB Nation Sports Talk? Basically,
we're here, baby.
Monday through Friday, as long as things work right. What's complicating things right now is my women's basketball schedule, traveling with Notre Dame women, and even, like there's a ACC women's basketball plays every Thursday and every Sunday. Sunday, obviously, is not an issue for the show, but Thursday, I'm pretty much always going to have a conflict. And if they're on the road, then I'm going to have a conflict Wednesday and Thursday. And in the case of this past week, we stayed out east, in Virginia, and went straight to North Carolina for the Wake Forest game. So it just, and Vince was sick, so we only had a couple of shows last week. In general, the plan is to have shows Monday through Friday, but it's also depending on who's available to do shows.
Yeah.
So that's and again, I'm going to be traveling this Friday because they actually have their ACC bye this weekend, but they're playing Saturday night at UConn. So that means we have to travel on Friday. So,
with your buddy on the call.
That's right. Gus Johnson calling the game on TV this weekend.
I hope you sit right next to him.
Have a Gus-gasm.
Yeah, I want to be right there.
Andre said he was at the Notre Dame Wake women's game yesterday and asked if I was there. Yes, I was. He says it was a very pro Notre Dame crowd. Not surprised. I was. If you saw the Notre Dame bench, Andre, I don't know where you were sitting, but if you were looking at the bench, like from the other side of the floor, if you were looking at Notre Dame's bench, I would have been just to the right of the bench. If you were looking at it from behind the bench, I would have been just to the left of the bench.
Oh, so you were right there. You could hear.
You've seen my bulbous, graying, balding head.
Oh, I always identify you.
Yes. So do I when I see the photos.
I know, right? I don't know if you've noticed, but I've decided to take it upon myself to complain about the fact that they always use the TV audio when they're showing highlights on social media by Notre Dame. I don't know why they don't use yours. It makes no sense to me.
I don't know what to say to that.
I got to tell you. And it's completely me doing it. It is not being pushed by Sean Stiers in any way. But I got to tell you, some of the announcers that do these women's games on TV, they're not great. You got great in-house people. Use it.
Didn't have to pay him a dime to say it. I appreciate that.
I'm just disappointed in the Fighting Irish media that they're just it feels lazy to me, Sean. That's what
the level of content, right? I mean, come on.
Just splice it together. Audio, video, splice it together.
Maybe I'm not good enough. I don't know. They've used Burmeister on the football calls. I know that. We all worked for the same place theoretically.
Just saying. Just saying.
Do say hello, Andre. I always enjoy it when I'm walking at a women's basketball game and I get, hey, are you Sean Stiers? And the first thing I want to say is depends.
Yeah, exactly. Who's asking?
But most of them have been IB guys and gals, and that's always fun getting to see some of the people who watch and listen and all that kind of stuff. Carlos, coming up in rapid fire, we'll talk all about.
I haven't asked you about this. I'm interested to see which direction we go on this.
DK, by the way, on the subject of the show, says Jesse could have covered. Take the training wheels off. He's ready. He was actually floating the idea of doing a solo mailbag.
Was he really?
Yeah,
that would have been amazing.
If you want a solo Jesse mailbag, the only issue was, I think by the time he suggested it, I might have been riding a bus on the way to the arena.
Oh, yeah.
So, because I would have to be the one who, gets all the back end stuff set up, and you know how
Yep,
that
yep.
goes.
Well,
So,
we can talk about the other stuff, but like his access is not one where he can pull up questions.
that's true. We would have to work on that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
That's a
which
very
we
good
need to do
point.
anyway because he needs to be able to star stuff and like be involved.
Yeah. It definitely helps when we're doing mailbag shows.
Yes.
Like if you and I are doing one,
Right.
when you can hit the star.
Yes.
We're getting in the
100%.
weeds on making the sausage and all that good
Well,
stuff. But
still needs to happen.